All right, well, hi, everybody. Thanks for your patience with us. Welcome to our first resolution forum. I am Megan Dayton. I'm the MAPE president, and I will be facilitating the forum today. So in just a few minutes, we'll jump into the resolutions. We have authors of, I think, most of the resolutions present for their resolutions today, and then we will provide time to take questions. If the resolution authors are not here, I will do my best to answer any questions that come up, but I will most likely refer you to reach out to those resolution authors if they are not here. Okay, next slide. So, what is a resolution? A resolution is a formal request to change one of our governing documents, which are the Constitution, the bylaws, or an elections rule. Resolutions can also be a formal request to modify a policy. So the perk of being a union is that we govern ourselves. And we at MAPE are unique in that we don't have an international or any other kind of organization that tells us how to govern ourselves. So we all get to have a voice in our own process. And the resolutions that you all submit are at the heart of the delegate assembly and the process that we go through every year. So the resolution process is designed to make our union stronger and more effective. So I want to say thank you to our members who submitted the 6 resolutions that we have for review this year. Next slide. Before we jump into the forum, we have a few housekeeping items for you. First of all, we are recording this forum, and it will be on the Delegate Assembly webpage at mape.org. So if you have delegates that are reaching out to you saying they missed this, you can direct them to that recording where they can watch the conversation that we have. There's somebody in the waiting room. We will pause for questions after each resolution is explained. You can ask questions using the Q&A function in Zoom, or you can raise your hand and unmute when we call on you. So we'll show each of the resolutions while it's being discussed. There's another person in the waiting room. Thanks. And you can also find copies on the DA webpage on mape.org. Next slide. So as we prepare for delegate assembly over the next month, there's a few reminders for our delegates and our alternates. The first one is that we have one final resolution forum after today. So please ensure all of your delegates and alternates in your region have attended at least one or have access to the recordings from this one or the other resolution forum, which is on Thursday, October 10th at 12 p.m. noon. The next one is that there's a parliamentarian overview to review Robert's Rules of Order, and that will be on Tuesday, October 1st at 12 p.m. Our parliamentarian, Lucy, will be leading that session. And this will also be recorded, but please try to make it to the live event if possible. And in preparation for that event, please review Robert's Rules. There's a document in the portal. So please review that before the session and certainly before delegate assembly so that you know how to do the things that you want to do. The finance work group is holding one final budget review to walk through the budget that delegates will vote on during delegate assembly, and this will be held on Monday, October 7th at 12 p.m. And this year, we constantly try to make delegate assembly a better process. So this year, we're offering a review for delegates where we will run through everything that we'll be voting on during delegate assembly. So that includes the agenda and the standing rules and the budget and the resolutions. All of those things that will come before you at delegate assembly, we're going to review those on Thursday, October 17th at 12 p.m. Next slide. There we go. All right, so let's jump into the resolution forum now. The Constitution and Rules Committee has set the formal order. We will take up resolutions at delegate assembly. So we have 6 resolutions that will be presented, of which 5 will be voted on during delegate assembly, and we'll talk about that 5th one also today. So I will introduce the title of the resolution, and whoever's here to present the resolution can unmute themselves. And then after they explain their resolution, we'll pause for any questions that come in. Again, you can either send those through the Q&A and I will ask them, or you can raise your hand and then unmute when I call on you. So we have allotted a little under 10 minutes per resolution today. So please be mindful of your question and answer time. And you can always follow up with the resolution authors or me if you want to, if you are not able to get your question in today. Okay, so let's just jump right into the first resolution. Let's go to the next slide, please. Can we go to the next slide, please? There we go. Thank you. Okay, the first resolution is to allow locals and regions to pay for attorney fees. So this resolution was passed by the MAPE Local 401 leadership team. The lead author on this resolution is Ronald Dixon. So Ronald, please go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us about your resolution.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Ronald, the treasurer of Local 401. And yeah, the resolution here is to essentially allow locals and regions the autonomy to be able to effectively consult with an attorney to deal with issues that are affecting like locals and regions. And this kind of came about, based on, kind of concerns and issues in relation to kind of the subject of the taxability of student loan debt reimbursement, which I won't really get into the specifics there because it's not 100% relevant to just the resolution itself. But yeah, the one thing I will note is that over the past month and a half or so, I've been working with MAPE Central, both elected leadership at MAPE Central as well as some staff at MAPE Central to improve upon the resolution itself. So what I will be introducing at Delegate Assembly, I'll be introducing an amendment to the original resolution that I submitted that still keeps the same objective, which is to allow locals regions to pay for attorney fees, but kind of offer some additional stipulations and whatnot. So essentially, what I'm introducing is a basically kind of basically two different paths that you can take. If you want, basically path A is if you want to have the MAPE Central potentially pay for the attorney fees, like let's say if you need to consult with an attorney on an issue affecting your local, for example, then you go to the MAPE Board of Directors, and then there's a time frame like 90 days for them to approve or deny that request. And then if they approve it, then they have control over if they consult with them or if you are allowed to consult with them directly, et cetera. And then they, pay for it, et cetera. Or then there's the other option where, the local can just simply, go ahead and use their own funds to pay for an attorney fee with the stipulation that you must, talk to and consult with your business agent, and there's a period of time for them to basically do some research to make sure that it's not something that MAPE Central already has like a legal opinion on file for. And then I also included in the amendment I'll be introducing uh oh yeah, I think that's the actual text of what I'm but yeah, thanks for putting that in there, appreciate it. For the so the next slide I would assume is it would have the local like the legal assistance paid by the local itself, I believe. Yes. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, so I do added some stipulations, such as like, you can't use, like local funds to hire an attorney association with like harassing people or like harassing the union or trying to delegitimize the union or to challenge the due structure or to initiate lawsuits or anything like that. Basically, the objective with kind of all those stipulations and the other amendments was to try to address the various concerns and questions and feedback that I've received on this, while still retaining the overall objective, which is to allow locals that ability to get timely legal assistance when necessary. Because, prefacing by saying, I definitely appreciate all the help and support I've received from Ape Central on the issue that I've been dealing with, this the taxability of student loan debt reimbursement. But at the same time, given the fact that it is kind of, there's the organizational kind of structure and there's some bureaucracy in there, et cetera, kind of makes it not super efficient. And when it comes to something like taxes, where there are deadlines and whatnot to potentially amend, if that's the determination that has to be reached in this particular situation, for example, then then it's something that we want to get done sooner rather than later. So with that, if there are any concerns, any questions here that I can potentially address, then I would be more than happy to field anything. So.
Thanks for that presentation, Ronald. We did make the changes to your resolution, and one other resolution, the authors submitted requested changes for those. So we have modified those documents, and that's what we'll be presenting today. So that's why you see the changes reflected. There is one question in the Q&A. Do we have any history or background on why this restriction on payment at the local for attorney fees was originally in place?
That is a good question. That I don't know. I don't know the exact answer to that, unfortunately. I do know that there are some concerns like like regarding like the allowing like determinations, legal determinations, to be able to benefit kind of the union as a whole. And that was kind of one of the, from to my understanding, one of the reasons why there was kind of a general preference to have those legal fees be paid for, and and those legal issues be dealt with on the MAPE Central kind of level. And one of the stipulations I included, and I forgot to mention this in my amendment, is to have a local, let's say, that pays for their own legal fee to provide a report to MAPE Central to basically provide basically the results, the kind of what the determination was, so that MAPE Central and therefore all the other locals can benefit from that as well. So we're not like having one local pay for an attorney fee here and then, potentially another one do something here, etc. And so on and so forth. So that's so I can't say that it's the exact reason why that stipulation is in the budget rules. But that is just one concern I heard that potentially is related to why it's there.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Thanks
that's all
for
I
that,
had. Sorry.
Ronald. I thought I was muted. I didn't know what was going on with the slides. Thanks for that answer. I also want to say that our chief of staff, you've been communicating with our chief of staff, who's also been talking with our attorney about this resolution. And so we can have a more maybe substantive answer for the next resolution forum. And we can talk about that there. A couple more questions, and then we're going to switch over to the next resolution. One, if a local pays for legal fees that resolves an issue that affects all MAPE members, will the local be reimbursed?
That is an excellent question. I would say, as per the terms of this like resolution, if it's something that the local one took charge of, and the local went through that second avenue, which was they kind of take the initiative to hire to consult with like an attorney of their choice, but it is something that does benefit MAPE as a whole, then I would say no, unless MAPE decided to reimburse in that situation. But if there's concern about the local paying for like an attorney fees, then the proposal I have does offer that first kind of avenue, which is MAPE Central bringing up to the board of directors to see if they're willing to pay for it kind of upfront. And technically you can do that now. That's what I'm doing with the student loan taxability thing. It's just that this proposal offers that as an option with deadlines, so it just doesn't sit there indefinitely. There's like 9, they have to make a decision within 90 days. So it's kind of a pros and cons. If you go with the local, you as the local wanting to pay for it to get the answer faster, then one of the downsides is, well, it's going to cost your local. So I would say, per the wording of the proposed amended resolution, then no, MAPE Central would not have to provide reimbursement. They could, in theory, I think, but they wouldn't necessarily need to or have to.
Sure.
Excellent
So it's
question.
not covered in your resolution, but these things can be amended in the future if we find need to make that change. One final question, and then we'll move on to resolution 2. Ronald, would the local have to vote on hiring an attorney, or is it just up to the president? Who decides?
Excellent question. I think I'm just going to double check really quick. The wording here, for the legal assistance paid by locals, locals have the authority to spend their union funds on legal fees if a majority of local elected officers agree to the expense. And then before that can be incurred, then you have to consult with a MAPE business agent who has 7 days to do the research, consult, etc., to see, make sure MAPE Central doesn't already have legal opinion on file for that. So yeah, but to answer the question, yes, it would require the local leaders, like local president, vice president, treasurer, etc., to vote on it. So it's not just one officer being able to, kind of do that with without being able to get a vote from like the rest of the local leadership. Excellent question.
Great. One more that I won't ask you to respond to, Ronald, but just for you to think about, came in the chat to me. It says, with the new language giving a 7 calendar day turnaround on this, does that not seem slightly restrictive? So you don't have to speak on that one, but maybe just think about it.
Okay, no, I will, and like I said, this, totally in flux, like at the, future meeting or even at delegate assembly, I'm totally open to amendments to if folks are more comfortable with, like, let's say 14 days or 21 days or something like that, or anything else. So, and I just want to end really quick. I know I'm on time. Thank you all for providing your questions. Thank you, Megan, for offering this space and providing your feedback, and then all as well as the staff and elected officials at MAPE Central as well. Chet and Todd, you both have definitely helped me on this quite a bit, and I appreciate it. And consulting, providing feedback, etc. So yeah, so I appreciate all of the support. Not necessarily of the resolution, like agreeing. I don't want to say that MAPE Central is endorsing this, obviously, but I appreciate the support I'm receiving with respect to the work and writing this and amending it and all that. So
yeah,
so
you bet.
you.
It's been good to work together to make sure it's ready and reflective of what you wanted to do. So thanks, Ronald. Okay, let's move on to resolution number 2, which involves the dissolution of the nominations committee. So this one was I have this was passed by the finance work group committee. I don't think that's right, but the lead authors on this one are, I don't think this is right either, Ted Snaza, Ronald Dixon, and Jackie Blogsfett. Is that right? Okay, that is right.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So maybe the finance work group part was just wrong. Okay, so whoever wants to speak on this resolution, just go ahead and unmute yourself and walk us through the resolution.
Thanks, President Dayton. This is Jackie Blogsfett. I'm Region 10 Director and also a member of MAPE's finance work group. And we were working on setting the draft of the proposed budget for 2025 as a finance work group. And there is a line in our draft budget that funds the nominations committee every year. And so, but for multiple years now, we've had a budget of $0 in that line because that committee hasn't been staffed and isn't really needed anymore. It's become kind of an old structural thing that hasn't been needed because of the way that we changed the election rules. I believe that was in the fall of 22. We changed our election rules to not have elections committees at our locals and instead to make the elections nomination process kind of transparent and something that all MAPE members can see in real time. So we have a spreadsheet that's posted on the elections committee page during nominations, when nominations are open. And we can all, our staff and our members can all log in and check out that publicly posted spreadsheet and see who's getting nominations, what positions are open and needing to be filled that haven't had any nominations submitted, etc. So we don't really need a nominations committee anymore. That's our assessment. The lead authors here, Ted Snaza, Ronald Dixon, and myself. We believe we don't need a nominations committee because it hasn't been funded for several years. And no one has, this committee hasn't been convened or had any members seated in the committee for many years. And so the other reason that we believe it's important is that it could potentially, if there was this desire to use that committee, it could be established and used to and have members seated to intentionally recruit folks for kind of someone who is already in power who wants to maintain power. So we feel that that making the process open of nominations, of looking for people and recruiting people to run for our statewide and regional offices, if we keep that kind of that activity open and available to all members and not needing to be seated on that committee and having the opportunity to be paid for lost time to do that work, we keep it kind of grassroots and keep it open and available to all members, and also kind of focused more on that local level rather than someone from in a higher position going and seeking people to run, rather than like more of a grassroots member recruitment for people to run who represent that local, that region. Let's see here. It really is the only, like, this really could have been, I think, a simple submission to the board of directors to change the bylaws. However, the nominations committee is part of our election rules. And so that is why we've, the main authors here have determined that we needed to submit this to the delegate assembly to pass this, because the delegate assembly is the only body who can change our MAPE election rules. So we hope that you see it as a pretty cut and dry thing. And I don't know, are there any questions, I guess?
Yeah, thanks for that presentation, Jackie. The board took action on this resolution. I wonder if you could explain that to the delegates.
The board took action. Oh, that we voted to support this resolution. Is that right? Was that on Friday? This and at the September meeting? Thank you, Megan. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
I did too. Suzanne reminded me. So.
Thank you, Suzanne.
We do have one question in the Q&A, Jackie. Dissolution of nominations committee. Are there any functions of the current structure that are not adequately addressed if the committee is dissolved?
That are not adequately addressed. I don't believe that there are any, I mean, we're taking it out of the election rules. So the questioner is asking if it's like anywhere else that the nominations committee has a function. I don't believe so. You can see in the text here that I think on the second page of the text, locals also used to have nominations committees, but that was removed in 22 at our delegate assembly when we removed local nominations committees. We thought there might be a reason. I think back then we thought there could be a reason that we still needed that nominations committee statewide, but it's kind of, from all appearances, it hasn't been used and hasn't been needed. And people just generally organize and you know, encourage who they think will be the best candidates for those statewide positions. And we really feel like all members should be encouraged to be a part of that effort and not feel like they need to be nominated to be on this nominations committee and appointed to that nominations committee to be able to do that kind of recruitment and talent kind of identification and encouraging of their members and their friends to run, right? So no, I can't think of anything that structurally isn't included here or that's being left out.
Great. Thanks for that answer, Jackie, and thanks for walking it through. I'm not seeing any more questions. So if folks do have
Okay.
questions about resolution 2, they could reach out to Jackie and talk about that. But let's move on
you.
to our third resolution. The lead authors on the third and fourth resolutions are Ted Snaza and Ronald Dixon. And since these two are so connected, Ted, Ronald, whoever's going to speak on this, I wonder if we might just cover both of them first and then take questions on them together. But if that's not what you want to do, that's totally fine also. But go ahead and unmute and walk us through your resolutions.
No, that's perfectly fine. Do you have any updates to them yet, or no? From the parliamentarian?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay.
You
Okay.
can talk
so,
about it in theory, though, if you want to, just kind of like what we've talked about the plan for them.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. So the very first line there might be wrong. We might have had a small local funding increase from like 95 cents to $1.25 like 6 years ago, as somebody mentioned. So that might be accurate or inaccurate, that statement. The goal with this resolution was to increase local funding considerably, as you can see from the monetary jump. There have been a fair amount of locals who have increased their engagement and their spending. So this was made in an attempt to address that. In addition to that, locals in the past have been very frugal with their spending because they're worried about running out of it. So this also addresses that, where locals would be funded fully at the beginning of a year. So they wouldn't have to save anything at the end of the year to be able to draw funds starting January 1st. They would still have access to the next year's funds. And I think that might be worded in the next one, not this one. Originally, I had both resolutions as one, but considering last delegate assembly where we split the election questions and the term and the length, I figured it'd be a good idea to split these when presenting them or submitting them. So that's why they're separate, but they work better hand in hand. They could both work though successfully on their own. Where did I leave off? The additional funding for locals. Okay, so the other reason that locals wouldn't spend all of their money is they were hoping to save some in case of certain crisis events, in case of a strike. And one, they shouldn't have to do that. MAPE Central should provide from the crisis fund in any event for that for every local, which they will. In addition to that, the second resolution, which don't jump ahead to it yet, at the end of the year recaptures money and sends it to that crisis fund. So then local money would still be going to the crisis fund as they wanted. So the two, and let me preface this by saying I've been getting opinions and talking to locals and in the cities in greater Minnesota about their concerns with local funding and everything for the last 8 to 10 years. So the two main concerns that I heard were, we didn't want MAPE Central to take our money. We wanted to have it in case of a crisis fund, and we wanted to have it for the beginning of the next year. So this addresses all three of those. Obviously, there's going to be other concerns but those were the main three that were brought up to me. What else? I think that covers pretty much everything with the first one, except for the fact that at the board meeting, Megan, the parliamentarian, well, that was an executive committee meeting before that, but we all discussed about having an option after the vote. So essentially, as it stands right now, the delegate assembly would vote to approve in theory the resolution. Yes, locals can use more money or not. And if they say yes, then we're seeing if there's a possibility to put in like a multiple choice option or fill in the blank, at which case, my recommendation would be to make it $2.50 or $3 or $4. And then so if all the delegates say yes, locals should have more money, then they would then vote on, after that, they would say, $2.50, $3, $4, whatever it was, whatever the options were. That of course isn't set in stone yet, However, that's what we're looking at trying to get done, just to make it a little bit easier, and then people can pick and choose which one they want the most. The reason for this resolution, I did list some of them, but there are a lot of locals who are, I felt that, and so Chet has spoken on this too a lot, that part of the psychological effect of locals not spending has grown to a point where there is not nearly enough spending going on. Locals currently have, I want to say, $1.7 million in reserve total for all the locals that haven't been spent. And the point of the money is recruitment and engagement on the local level, recruiting new members and engaging the members you have and helping them stay ready for organizing events, to keep them active, to keep your local strong and growing. And it's not being done enough. Part of the reasons I already mentioned, saving the money, being too frugal. So the effect of these two resolutions together would, one, encourage more spending because locals would have more. So they might say, I don't know what to do with it. Well, that's where I would encourage thinking outside the box, get creative, give more lost time, do whatever you can, talk to other locals, go to your president is a part of the president's committee where they can speak to other locals to see what they do to spend their money. Same with the treasurers. We're having treasurers training at the finance work group committee. So there are avenues for them to speak to other locals to find out how they do it and what they do. And we want the money spent. We want you to engage your members and to get new members. So it's trying to twist that psychological aspect around so that locals change their mindset and start being more aggressive with their spending. Now, if they're not able to, now you can go to resolution 4. If they're not able to spend it, you've got some left over. Well, guess what? It's silver lining here. It goes to the crisis fund and it helps increase our crisis fund, which is our striking power. The more money we have in the strike fund, the longer we can last and the more people are willing to go on strike and fight for a better contract. And in that fourth one, if you want to go to the next slide here, it does mention specifically, I think, I'm pretty sure it's in this one, towards the bottom. All balances will need to be covered. Trying to remember, I know it's in there somewhere. I don't need to read it to you. You can read it yourself. But it does say that locals will have access to their funds right away at the beginning of the year. The only issue there would be a cash flow problem, which we talked about at the finance work group committee wouldn't be a problem. I think that covers most of the main aspects and most of the main questions I've gotten on all of this. But feel free to put in any other questions. I'm sure I've forgotten a few aspects or details.
We've got a number of not resolutions. We've got a number of questions, Ted, and I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of them. So I'll just take them in the order based on the timestamp that they came in. So how do these resolutions impact the budget that we would already have passed or at least voted on at the time we vote on this? Increasing funds somewhere cause funds to decrease from somewhere else. Would this not immediately make the budget out of date? Do we know where this money will come from in the proposed budget? That's a lot of questions.
I can get to them all.
Okay.
The budget would have already been passed, so it doesn't affect the budget. Any sort of budgetary concerns would be handled by the board. And we've already discussed that part of it would probably, we would use the undesignated reserves and some of the money recaptured from locals to help fund any cash flow issues there were, but we do not expect there to be any issues or any budgetary concerns the first year. Now, when you get to the end of 2025 and we're creating the budget for 2026, that's where, whatever we increase it to, we'll have to account for in the budget. But considering the budget would have technically already been passed by the assembly, it would not affect the budget whatsoever. And I'll repeat it again, any concerns or issues, financial issues that come up, the board would have to deal with it over the next year. But we didn't see any when we discussed that finance work group committee.
Okay. How did you arrive at the $4 per member amount?
It was supposed to be a striking amount. I truly was debating between $3 and $4. but considering we had a surplus at the time, I felt using the majority of it to give to locals to spend it as wisely as they can was a good idea. But since there have been other issues, such as the million for the membership drive that have come up, that's why I agreed it was a good idea to allow, a multiple choice, a $2.50, $3, $4, so that it can still be a considerable amount, but so that it can fit into any future budget years without too much of an issue.
Okay. If the local shouldn't save for emergencies because central will cover, what's the logic for increasing dues to $4?
Two parts. One, the psychological aspect I mentioned of encouraging locals to spend to get to that point where they can go to MAPE Central and request more funds. And two, it would be great if locals actually had to have that issue where they came to MAPE Central because they were spending too much. It happens rarely, and when it does happen, it's for a low amount or a big event to hopefully get it funded from outside of there. It's not a regular occurrence by any means at this point. So technically, you're right. Locals could just overspend and then come to MAPE Central and ask for it. But part of the concern there also might be what if that local is concerned about how the board would react or how the finance work group committee would react if they're being too frugal themselves at that time. So that would be my two main responses to that, why I think it'd be a good idea for locals to have more money to spend.
Okay. For locals who are struggling with their budgets, what are the particular cost drivers that are causing their budget concerns?
I would certainly say if you have any locals with that issue, I would say bring that to the finance work group committee and we can work with the president and treasurer and try to go over those concerns.
Okay. Most locals don't spend their current budget, not because they fear running out, but because it is hard to spend that much money. Does giving more money make sense in this situation?
I would question the most locals aspect of it. You could make an argument in that respect to things might all change for the restructure. And there might be no small locals at that point, but there might be. Again, half of the reason, well, not half, but I'd say a third of the reason for doing this is that psychological aspect. Maybe those locals have so much money because they've forgotten how to spend it. It's been years since those locals ran out of money or spent up to their budget. And so Janice and the pandemic both affected this considerably. And we need to shift back to a more aggressive stance when it comes to recruiting and engaging. You say that locals have a ton of money. I would counterpoint that by pointing out that recruitment percentages are down considerably. So I would say many locals aren't doing their job when it comes to recruiting new members in the first 5 years, and that having money it takes away that excuse, not that they're using it as an excuse, but it gives them a push towards building that back up again. If they don't spend it and all the locals then have a ton of money and it's going to the crisis fund, that's not the worst thing in the world, but we can always revisit it in a year or two. But hopefully at that point, if we revisit it in a year or two and take money back from the locals then and lower it down, hopefully that psychological shift will have happened then, and you'll have these locals spending more and trying to find more events and more ways to engage.
Okay. Just one more minute. I want to switch gears at 12:45. But the next question is, are a majority of local presidents in agreement with this resolution, and were they involved in the creation of it?
Local presidents were not involved in the creation of it, except in the sense that, like I said, I've talked with local leaders, directors, tons of MAPE members over the last decade. So Technically, these presidents weren't, unless I've talked with them in the past, but there have been many presidents in the past I've talked with. When I spoke at the President's Committee a couple weeks ago, there was not a consensus, I would say one way or the other, but we also didn't do a poll on it. There were a lot of questions that I answered, and if I had to guess, I'd say the room was kind of split about 50-50. But even the ones who were against it, hopefully if they see they have more money, they try to spend it. That would be my hope. And I think there was a third part of that question, but I can't remember for sure if I didn't address it all.
There was only two. It was, are the local presidents in agreement with this and were they involved?
Okay.
Okay, there's a couple of questions left in here. I would encourage you to reach out to Ted to have some conversation about the resolution, because we're not going to be able to get to it today. So thanks, Ted, for going over that and answering some questions.
Absolutely.
And thanks for going over both of them at the same time. So the next resolution, the next resolution is on the addition of the 32-hour work week to our legislative agenda. And I think we have the resolution author here to talk. There she is. So before I turn it over to her, I would just say I'll invite you all to save your questions about the 32-hour workweek campaign. They're going to have a table during delegate assembly, so you can talk to them directly. And we're going to do a session, more like a presentation conversation around the 32-hour workweek. But Barbara Monaco is the author of this resolution, and I'll turn it over to her to kind of walk through the process. And Barbara, if you can also maybe address why we won't be voting on this at delegate assembly, that would also be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Monaco. I am part of the grassroots effort for the 32-hour work week. So I am the author by name, maybe not by word. And so this is a resolution to add support to the 32-hour work week to the political agenda. And the reason that we will not be voting on this at DA is that the political council has met and has already added language to support the 32-hour work week, which will then be approved or voted on at DA. So the political agenda in its totality will be voted on and approved at DA, which will include the language in support of the 32-hour work week. So the reason that we're not voting on it is because it kind of happened, and then it needs to get actually approved. So the language that we were asking for was basically to add additional information in the body of the political agenda to say that this is in support of families, and that working less and providing more time back is a benefit that we will fight for as MAPE as part of our political agenda. I do have the direct language, which I think the resolution is now no longer on the website either. I don't know if that was an intentional change.
We took it off of the DA page because it won't be voted on during DA. But it should be.
So the official language that we put forward was, we believe that workers are entitled to their time and support efforts to reduce the number of work hours required with no loss in pay, such as the 32-hour work week. And we wanted to put that into MAPE supports a middle-class, family-friendly agenda, ensuring equal opportunity for all.
Yep. So thanks, Barbara. And you'll see this language in the legislative priorities, which will be reviewed at delegate assembly also. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Barbara, for being here. And speaking about resolution number 5, again, Barbara et al. Will have a table at delegate assembly where you can talk with them directly. And we're hoping to find some time on the agenda where they can give a presentation and talk with us delegates about the work that they've done. Okay, thanks again, Barbara. Let's switch to resolution 6. Resolution 6 is supporting a ceasefire and divestment in Israel-Palestine. This resolution has been amended by the author, Michael Yost. So Michael, I will just hand it over to you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and walk us through your resolution.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Megan. Everyone hear me fine? Just giving a thumbs up. Okay, good.
Yep.
Yeah, my name's Michael Yost, pronounced he, him, his. I'm in MAPE Local 401, which covers the Department of Revenue. I work as a research analyst on corporate tax policy. I'm excited to talk to you about the resolution, which calls essentially for two big asks. You know, we're not alone on this issue, but this is kind of the vision. We would like a ceasefire in the ongoing war in Gaza, which has since escalated to include several other countries. And additionally, to seek divestment of our pensions from entities that are profiting and funding that war. In particular, weapons companies is kind of like the prototypical example. This is a bit of a long resolution, so if I don't have time to cover everything, I'm going to put my email in the Q&A, I guess, since we don't really have a chat. And I am happy to talk to literally anyone about this. So I'll just dive in. Kind of the first question, why is this a union issue? You know, we're a state workers union in Minnesota. You know, we're a small union. We care about our contract, and that the first point of our resolution is kind of intended to address that. Why is this a union issue? It's a union issue because as a term of employment, working for Minnesota state government, you are required to make contributions into the pension, which funds current retirees, and then the surplus is kind of invested in you know, financial assets to try to build that pension and make sure that it's solvent and financially sustainable for many years to come. So specifically, the State Board of Investment, the SBI, is the one that manages our pension, decides what gets invested in, what doesn't get invested in. A group called the Anti-War Committee has identified that there's about $800 million that the SBI has chosen to invest in entities that are carrying out the occupation of Palestinian territory and the war in Gaza. There are other kind of figures for this. I've also heard something like around 1% of our pension is kind of invested in this stuff. I don't have a source on hand for that. I do have a source on hand for the 800 million, so that's why I chose to use that number. This has been a spectacularly violent war, horribly tragic, that's impacted the lives of really countless civilians. The official number is about 40,000 people have died in Gaza as a result of this war. A study that was commissioned in the British medical journal, The Lancet, has estimated that when you include things like malnutrition and disease, you know, the number climbs up to 186,000, which is nearly 10% of the population of that territory, the Gaza Strip. So really, no matter how you slice it, it's really bad. Kind of the flip side of this is, you know, we have this ethical concern. We're funding this really violent war. Flip side of that is, well, you know, we want a financially stable and, you know, healthy pension that will continue to fund retirees for many years to come. I really hope that the pension is around when I retire, you know, 30 years from now. But we, you know, take that seriously as a concern. The legal risks for investments in Israel in particular have climbed a great deal in just over the last year. The leadership of the Israeli government is currently facing indictments, warrants for their arrest for the specifically Benjamin Netanyahu and the defense minister Yoav Gallant for the commission of war crimes in the commencement of that war. So that's bad, but it also presents a serious kind of financial risk for our pensions. If we're investing in something in a government that could face financial sanctions from other countries that, you know, the 150 or so that are party to the International Criminal Court, they are facing a variety of other legal risks, such as orders from the International Court of Justice that also has, you know, jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories. So these aren't risk-free investments. I think even kind of the proponents would of investing in Israel would kind of acknowledge that, you know, there's a very rapidly changing legal environment right now, and we should be concerned about that if we want, you know, a pension that will last as long as it should. So kind of precedent, there's a couple for these. First, in 1985, the State Board of Investment itself chose to divest from South Africa. the South African government committed a policy called apartheid, which was a system of racial segregation and white supremacy that lasted until like 1990 or so. So the SBI was kind of ahead of the curve on that one, required divestment from South Africa. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the Minnesota state legislature passed a bill that would require divestment from Russia and Belarus. So essentially, our resolution asks for consistency. If we want to, be against, horribly violent invasions and wars, we should uphold that kind of standard universally. Finally, the kind of last whereas of our statement is kind of mapping what trade unions and labor unions in Israel and Palestine are actually kind of like doing about this issue, because I think it's important that we be in solidarity with other labor unions, even if they're not in Minnesota, even if they're not even in the United States. So this has been an issue that the Palestinian trade unions have highlighted for a long time. They want kind of divestment from the companies that uphold this kind of really violent system, this really violent war that's going on. There's also kind of been a shift within Israel itself over the last year. There's been increasing tension between the government and the citizens of Israel. Citizens of Israel, by and large, prioritize the return of hostages that were taken by Hamas during the October 7th attacks. That to fulfill that priority, many of these trade unions have called for a general strike that occurred on September 2nd before it was shut down by Israeli judicial authorities. So even though there's kind of a lot of tension between Israeli and Palestinian trade unions, even Israeli trade unions at this point are calling for ceasefire against Gaza so that the negotiations for hostages can actually take place and can be fulfilled and people can see their families again. So big long text, don't want to overwhelm you, but the basic idea is we want to create a task force that will kind of look at this specific issue, figure out where our pensions are being invested, try to get more precise data on, the investments that our pension is supporting. We want to communicate with other public sector unions because we're not alone on this issue. Every kind of public union in the state of Minnesota also provides funds to the SBI for investments in pensions. So, this is not the final word. This is kind of like a opening draft of what we'd like to see. We want to engage with other unions on this issue because they have a stake in it as well. We want to support legislation. We have we would like to have the SBI take action on it, which we believe they have the power to do. But failing that, they're under tremendous political pressure. The State Board of Investment is made up of our statewide elected officers, people like Tim Walz, the auditor, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General are on this board, and they face statewide political pressures. I think unions should have kind of more say over what happens with our pensions. So, we've made that call to the SBI. We want to make that call to the SBI as a union. And we want to support failing that legislation that would actually require it, as was passed in the case of Russia and Belarus. So to communicate this, we've called on the board of directors and executive committee to issue a statement to that effect, with consultation from the task force to kind of highlight those spots where maybe there's less expertise within our leadership bodies. So there's a legislative component, kind of we want this to be a serious effort. We want to dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure that we have all our ducks in a row and have sustainable, good, robust legislation. Finally, very basic ask, MAPE should divest its own funds from war and occupation. By and large, as I understand it, this is not an issue. Mostly the MAPE funds are invested in kind of very low risk investments like, federal bonds and money market for, just the simple fact of like holding on to our money. But in the unlikely case that there's anything along those lines within our own investments, we would like to see our union money pulled out of it, not just the pension money. So that's a big thing. That's all. Sorry. Let's ask some questions or answer some questions if anything.
Yeah. So we are unfortunately out of time. We have one question and then we're gonna wrap up, but I don't see it. So Suzanne, do you want to just ask it?
In the to my chat, the question was, have you requested that these items be added to MAPE's political agenda?
That is a good question. We a few weeks ago worked with the political council to update the MAPE's language on our pension investments. About a decade ago, the delegate assembly passed a resolution asking for pension divestment from fossil fuels, with the understanding that fossil fuels kind of imperil the continued burning of them imperil life on Earth through, you know, the mechanism of climate change. So we update the political council passed that updated language that said, you know, we believe in a financially responsible growth strategy that balances these sorts of risks against kind of growth. So we want to be consistent with like the interests of working people, not just on the issue of fossil fuels or Israel or, you know, wars more broadly. So that language has been updated. We wanted to leave the discussion of Israel-Palestine to the delegate assembly because this is admittedly a controversial topic that I think could benefit from kind of wide engagement all across our union to make sure that everyone has their say, because I know this is a sensitive issue and people have a lot of personal stake in it, and we want to be respectful of that. And so I think the widest decision-making body is kind of the best for that. So yes, language has been updated in the political council for our political priorities that would kind of encompass a broad kind of attitude of we want good pension investments that aren't, you know, horribly violent, horrible for kind of our members and for people worldwide.
Okay, well, thank you, Michael. I do see about maybe like 10 questions left for all of the resolutions. So that's not just for you, Michael. But if you did have a question that I didn't get to today, I would encourage you to reach out to the resolution authors to have your questions answered, or maybe come back to the next resolution forum to have your question answered. Again, this will be recorded and we'll post it on our website. So I want to thank you all for spending an hour, your lunch hour with us to hear from your fellow MAPE members on ideas around making our union stronger. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you all at the upcoming forums and then ultimately at Delegate Assembly in October. Wear your Halloween costume if you so choose. See you there.